Welcome back. We're talking about the so-called war on terror, how to fight it and how to win it, with one of America's foremost legal and strategic experts, Philip Bobbitt, who was Director for Intelligence Programs in the National Security Council during the administration of former President Bill Clinton. He joins us today from Austin, Texas, where he teaches law. His latest book is Terror and Consent: The Wars for the 21st Century. Welcome back to you, sir. I'm going to start off straight off with a telephone call that we got from one of our viewers from Liberia. This is Cyril calling. Cyril, go ahead with your question.
My question is straightforward, and I'd like to ask the professor there, if his definition of terrorism is an action of force against a group of people or an individual to do what is, or to carry out what is lawful for them to do, then I want to know why the United States and the United Nations are going around the world forcing out legitimate leaders of their country and replacing them by whom they want to, and putting sanctions on countries and instructing them on whom to sell the natural resources to and who to issue concessions and agreements to. I'm wondering whether those actions by the United States and the United Nations are not acts of terrorism. And if it is, I think some of those leaders should go before international criminal courts to answer for some of the actions that they have carried out in Africa and other developing and underdeveloped countries.
Okay, Cyril, thanks for your question.
Well, of course, I'd like to hear exactly which country, which intervention, which UN force the caller has in mind. But as a general principle, I would say that the United Nations and other regional security forces can intervene when a state has eclipsed its own sovereignty. And it does that by campaigns of human rights abuses, including genocide, against the state's own people. A regime forfeits the right to be independent of intervention or sanctions when it becomes a lawless state. And those laws are not laws that I made up, or the laws that the United States makes up or gives an eccentric interpretation to, or a self-serving interpretation. These are laws that are at the very heart of the global community. They're laws against widespread systematic abuses against civilians by their own regimes. These regimes could scarcely hide behind their commercial interest as a way of restoring their sovereignty, because it's they themselves who have forfeited their sovereignty.
And give us an example of a state like this.
Well, I suppose the systematic campaigns against Muslims by the Milosevic regime would be an example. I would imagine that the campaigns against the Shia in Iraq by Saddam Hussein and the use of chemical weapons against the Kurds in that state might be another example.
Well,
I know many people feel that the abuses against tribes in the Darfur region may be an example.
Okay, let's go to another one. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to just add the campaign of genocide in Rwanda, but please, no, you go.
We have another caller from London. Arianam in London. Go ahead with your question.
Oh, hello. I'm Ian. I'm calling from London. The gentleman was just talking about what exactly happening about the human rights and genocide and what is going on in Sri Lanka. It is the same principle used by President Bush, war on terror. But this word has been used against the Tamil civilians. This is a genocide. I mean, if you watch today's Dateline SBS program, Australian program, the defense minister, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, was very aggressive towards the SBS Dateline journalist. It is on the YouTube as well. So I am very concerned about my people being killed in the name of war on terror. Please,
yes,
if you can help.
I don't know that I could be of much help. The caller seems to know a good deal more about the situation than I do.
But I was just wondering, isn't the caller addressing the fact that when one talks about a war on terror, it depends who's defining the war on terror. Different people see it differently. We've had the age-old difference between one person's terrorist being another person's freedom fighter.
Yes, I think that's one of the most insidious ideas loose in international politics today, and that's why I offer a definition that tries to draw a bright line between those insurgents and dissidents who are trying to restore the rule of law, and those who systematically want to violate human rights laws. I don't think if you adopt the view that one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, that you will ever resolve these conflicts. It will always be just a matter of whose ox is being gored. You need some legal standard that is independent of that kind of subjective assessment.
And under those circumstances, what do you believe are the root causes of terrorism in the world today? I mean, we hear a lot of things. We hear about, for instance, the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands. We hear about America's unconditional support for Israel. We hear about America's support for dictatorial regimes in the Middle East. What are the root causes?
You know, I think they vary enormously from region to region and society to society. I don't know that there is one single cause or one single group of causes that applies to every terrorist group. But I will say this, although I realize this sounds a bit provocative. In terms of 21st century, what I've called market state terrorism, terrorism that is global, that is networked, that outsources its operations and privatizes them, in terms of that kind of terrorism, the chief cause is probably the overwhelming strategic power of the United States and our concomitant vulnerability. We are very vulnerable. And those states that cannot challenge us directly may wish to do so indirectly through network terrorists.
Is that what brings about the term asymmetric warfare?
That is an example of asymmetric warfare, yes.
Okay, let's go to another one of our callers. This is Mahmoud calling from London. Mahmoud, what do you have to say?
Thank you. I have two questions or three. First, you have already mentioned one of it. In your definition about the terrorism, based on your definition, where the recent massacre in Israeli massacre in Gaza, where does that fall in? That is one. Second, if I'm understood, you have just said in terms of who is terrorism and who is the freedom fighter, we know bin Laden was former friend of CIA. This, to what extent is American foreign policy contributing to radicalization and terrorism and all that? This one, at one time, is somebody your friend, and the other day is your enemy, and you are labeling a terrorist.
Well, I don't know that bin Laden was ever our friend, and I doubt he ever had any contact directly with CIA, but he was certainly an ally of convenience against the Russians in Afghanistan. I don't think he was ever an American friend. His goals, I think, and I think the caller would probably agree with me, his goals run completely counter to human rights law, which I believe he despises. And they run counter to the idea that a state should get its authority from its people, from their consent. I don't think bin Laden would tolerate that. And that's one thing that makes him a terrorist. Not that I call him a terrorist, but that he takes up the weapons of violence to prevent societies from choosing their own leaders and from recognizing the rule of law to protect human rights. I think that's why he's a terrorist.
I have another.
The fact he's been rather successful at it.
I have another question here, and this is from Will Mosley. He writes to us. This is on an email that he sent to us from the United States. And he asks, what is your take on Gitmo, that's a reference to the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center, and detainee rights, rights in quotation marks?
Well, I've written about this, and I've had, I think, more or less the same views for some time. I don't think that it mattered where the detention facilities were. Putting them in Guantanamo was a transparent ruse to try and get them out from under the purview of the federal courts. I assume that the rights of detainees include the right to habeas corpus, the right to a lawyer, the right to access to the International Committee of the Red Cross. I assume that they include the right not to be physically abused or psychologically tormented, that they have rights to trial and appeal. I don't think that detainees are common criminals, and I think we need a body of law to recognize that difference. But they don't simply forfeit their rights by having conducted very serious and very violent acts.
Professor, we don't have much time, but I just want to get this in. Do you think that the new Obama administration should be talking to groups like the Taliban or Hamas, for that matter?
Well, I think that the new administration, or any administration, should be in a kind of constant dialogue, even with those elements that we find most retrograde. The difficulty with talking to your enemy usually comes from your ally, because the ally fears that you're going to compromise their rights or sell them out for some kind of partial solution. So, in the case of the Taliban, we have to be very sensitive to what the Afghan government wants. It's an elected government, and they have to have an important say in that.
Professor,
it's my understanding
I'm sorry, we're going to have to end it there. We've run out of time. My apologies. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us. We'll see you the next time.